right, seniors,
All right.
we're trying to finish up this year in Spanish, and I hate that we're not together to practice this future tense, this new tense we're just learning. And next time, your next group of assignments that you get, we will be learning another new tense. So I hope we will be able to be back together for the end. We will see. You have a sheet of assignments. You know you are still going to receive verse and vocabulary quiz grades. And this will be from the written work you turn in to me. So please do this carefully, neatly, because I will be grading it. If I can't read it, I don't think you'll get a good grade. Make sure you have everything spelled correctly, accent marks where they belong. Make sure you do each assignment completely and carefully, as I will be grading this. Please review your future tense endings. Make sure that you know those endings for the future tense, for regular AR, ER, and IR verbs. You have the one set of endings to learn. Those are on page 454. Remember, the future tense, you add these endings to the infinitive. Now that is something different than we've ever done in verb conjugation. We do not get rid of the infinitive ending, AR, ER, and IR. We add these endings to the infinitives. And remember, these endings are the same as we learned for that helping verb haber. Aos, amos, on. So, and make sure you know the accent marks. You must add those accent marks where called for. That is very important. Now, on page 466 in your textbook, if you will look at that, we have learned to add our future tense endings. These stressed endings. Each one of them has a written accent mark except the nosotros form. So please make sure you use those. Now, in this chapter, we are going to learn 10 irregular verbs in the future tense. Now, these 10 irregular verbs will have the regular future tense endings. What you need to learn is you need to memorize 10 irregular stems. Now, you know we have done this before in other tenses. In the preterite, remember the irregular stems? Now, the irregular future stems on page 466, they are divided into 3 groups. The first group, saber, haber, poder, and querer, all you do is you delete, you leave out the E in the infinitive. Instead of saber, S-A-B-E-R, it's S-A-B-R. And then you will add your future tense ending. And if you learn to pronounce these words, you will have no trouble remembering which they are. You will know that for saber, you would just say, yo, what? Sabre. Now, the second group, the ER or IR verbs, instead of the E or the I in the infinitive ending, you are going to substitute a D for the E or for the I. Poner would be P-O-N-D-R. You put a D instead of the E. Venir, to come, you would have V-E-N-D-R. So you have a D instead of the I. So you're going to substitute a D for these four verbs. Substitute a D instead of the E or the I. Now, the third group, you have two verbs. And these are just completely irregular. Hacer, the stem changes to H-A-R. So it would be yo, are. And decir, to say or to tell, changes to D-I-R. So, now one thing you might notice, in all 10 of these verbs, do you notice every one of them ends in what letter? The stem. It ends in an R. S-A-B-R, P-O-N-D-R, and then even the two that the major change. Hacer, H-A-R, and decir becomes D-I-R. To these irregular stems, you are going to add the regular endings. And they're listed right up there. See the little box at the top of this page, 466. Your future tense endings are listed again there for you. To these irregular stems, you're going to add those endings. Make sure you remember to use your written accent marks. So memorize. Number 2, 466, those irregular stems. Just as we memorized those irregular stems back when we learned the preterite tense. That is most important. Memorize this. And then, of course, on page 468, you will do the exercises as I have assigned them. Exercises 1, 2, and 3. Now, on page 469, you need to study that page. And this is nothing new. We learned, do you know when the artist painted the picture? That's in the preterite. Yes, I know when the artist painted the picture. Now, if we're using the future tense, it's the same thing. The only thing you're doing different is instead of the preterite, pinto, you're using the future, pintará. So there's nothing, you're joining these clauses and you're using the future tense instead of the past tense. Do you know if, do you believe that, do you say that? You know those expressions at the bottom of page 469. Please study that page and follow the directions I gave you for page 470. In exercise 1, it says answer the questions, but I'm not having you do that. I'm just having you translate the questions into English. Exercise 2, you are to translate just as it tells you. On 471, the future with if clauses. We know the word for if in Spanish is si, S-I. If you study, then you will learn. If you eat, then you will grow. If you slip, you will fall. So you have the if clause and you have the result. These if clauses, you can have two kinds of if clauses. And we learned this in English when we studied the subjunctive mood. You can have an if clause, such as the ones we've just read. These are things that would probably happen. They're real if clauses. If this, then this will happen. That's quite possible and even probable. But the second group of if clauses could never happen. They're totally impossible, just hypothetical. And we call these unreal or imaginary if clauses. If I could, I would fly to school. That's not going to happen. So, we're not going to be dealing with those kind of clauses, the second type. We're only going to be dealing with real if clauses. In real if clauses, the conclusion is usually in the present. The if clause is in the present tense, that verb. If you listen, that's present tense. But the conclusion is in the future tense. If you listen, you will understand. Si usted escucha, present tense. Usted comprenderá, future tense. So in the real if clauses, the if clause is in the present tense. The conclusion, the result, will be in the future tense. Now, you could do that, reverse that. You can say, you will understand if you listen. Usted comprenderá si usted escucha. The conclusion will still be in the future tense. The if clause will be in the present tense. That's what you're learning here. So in a real if clause, something that could possibly happen and would probably happen, the conclusion will be in the future tense. On page 472, I have given you, you are to do those two exercises. Just follow the directions. Exercises 1 and 2. And that will pretty much take care of chapter 24. Chapter 24. Now, what are you going to do about the verses? You are going to learn your new verse. You will not be in class to write it as a quiz, but you are going to be writing it as instructed, and that will be graded for accuracy and neatness and legibility. You are to learn the new verse. You're to write it in English and in Spanish 10 times. Now, this is not to punish you. This is that I will know that you have at least looked at that verse and are somewhat familiar with it. Number 1, write it in English. Write it in Spanish. Number 2, write the same verse, English and Spanish. Number 3, English and Spanish. You are to do this 10 times. Now, the previous verse, you are to write only once. That's just to refresh your mind from the one you learned. Write it in English and Spanish once. Make sure you punctuate it correctly. I do not usually grade that on a quiz, but since you have it right there, I will be noticing that. Your vocabulary, the same thing. We cannot have a vocabulary quiz. Please learn those words. Write each word in English and in Spanish 10 times, the same as your verse. English, Spanish, 10 times for each word. You can write each word in English and in Spanish 10 times each. So, if you have any questions, you may ask them on my schoolworks. Monday through Friday, 10 to 2. Good luck.